much, Don. My name is Hurtado, and I work with SPD Radify, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's exciting, I can tell you that. But next, I want to say, Jesse Cooper, I know you told your boss that you're retiring, right? No? Yes? After many years, I'm not going to say how many, Mr. Cooper is going to retire in November 30th.
November 30th.
So he's going to leave small shoes to fill. So the objectives for this next 45 minutes are to provide you with the latest in utility news. We've got some hearings and utility workshops that we're going to do as well. We're going to discuss the design bid build process. Mr. Cooper, we got an escalation matrix. I will be providing you with the design build utility adjustment process, and then we have a short time for questions and answers. I'll say this. One of the main issues that we have in our right-of-way projects, as you know, it's not just acquisition of properties, but also the adjustment of utilities. Case in point is this video that you're going to watch.
TxDOT says $25 million of your tax dollars have been spent on road projects because of utility company delays.
Just in our area, we have highlighted 6 projects TxDOT says have been delayed. The longest is along US 290, delayed for 11 months. KXAN's Phil Prazen shows us what the utility says it's doing to fix the problems.
Road projects can get complicated with the pipes and electrical lines that crisscross our state. But officials from AT&T came to a hearing at the Capitol Tuesday to answer questions about possibly causing $21 million in delays.
And we do take them very seriously. We don't sit around a table and plan on how to delay a project.
That's John T. Munford representing AT&T. He says factors like endangered species studies and security laws on telecommunication equipment can delay their work. AT&T says they'll work better with TxDOT. A spokesperson emailed me a statement saying they have a vested interest in well-maintained and safe roads, and they are implementing improvements to address delays and assigning a manager to each market responsible for government projects.
We're losing time, which is really precious in a state that's growing the way we're growing, and we're losing money.
Both lawmakers and the communication company left the hearing agreeing that more communication is needed between them. And they'll bring up this issue again at another hearing in 6 weeks. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
This is important because Texans have the opportunity this November to dedicate more than $4 billion a year to Texas roads. Many proposed projects could involve AT&T.
As you can see, these are some of the issues that we're having to deal with, and hopefully through this discussion, we'll be able to provide some answers to you.
You couldn't use a short joke? I guess that would work too well.
I can do that.
I thought so. I thought so. Okay. We're going to bounce around just a little bit here. Whoa, let me go back. It's very touchy. We're going to talk more about the AT&T and the hearings down at the Capitol. But for a moment, we're going to jump over to the current events of the FHWA. And some different things that y'all have heard, rumored. You've seen different practices if you work in the districts with us, and I just thought we'd address those real quick. Alternate procedure. For y'all, for the ones in the audience that do not know what an alternate procedure is, that was set up by the federal government about 25 years ago for the state to take the place of the federal government in the oversight of projects. Now, if we worked in Oklahoma or in one of the other states, every utility agreement that you produced would not only go through the state DOT, but it would then be forwarded to the FHWA office. They would review and comment on that, and then it would come back down the pike to you before you could do the work. The number of agreements that go through our office in Texas would take a considerable workload, and the local FHWA has said, hey, TxDOT, you have a good record, and so we want to give you the ability to execute the agreements without an FHWA review. They review our policies, our manuals, and our procedures. And we've done that for years. And we turn those in on a utility agreement basis. They further now have delegated that authority to us to say, hey, you don't have to go and tell us about each individual agreement, but you keep the list at your office, which we do in ROAS, and we can then report to them the number of projects, the number of agreements that we work on at regular intervals, or as they call. So that is the reason, if you're out at a district and you haven't seen you haven't looked at the manual updates, we do not require you to make that request for alternate procedure because Austin is taking care of you. We actually are taking care of you, believe it or not, on that one. Okay, and that is a good thing. Now, on the side note, Buy America and the NEPA approvals, Buy America is something they implemented. It is real. They are checking on us, and it is going forward. So even though you're not hearing as much about it, we hear about it in our office. Also, as many of y'all know, the environmental process, just like I was speaking about the alternate procedure, that has been delegated down to TxDOT. And how does that affect us in right-of-way and utilities? What we're looking at is the ability to proceed when we have the appropriate approval level of authority. If you've noticed, our right-of-way manual activities prior to release has been changed. I don't know the exact name of it, but it's now the authority to proceed, and that's what we're looking at on our basis is how do we proceed on the individual utility, on the individual parcel that we are working on. The things that I just got through telling the Texas Surveyors Association last week is if you're a surveyor, beware. Our right-of-way managers may ask you to do the first 5 parcels at the intersection, bring those in, and then work with the rest of the project. As utility coordinators, we're going to be looking at the utility adjustment that need to occur first, that we need to get an advanced start on, and we'll be working with those earlier. So the scheduling and the management of our projects are very key. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention right here, somebody mentioned I've been here since 1999. That is true. During the 16 years, I had not seen any audits really in our utility arena up until 3 years ago. Our state auditor's office has now learned what a utility adjustment is, the risk that Don was speaking about, and is looking at how we proceed and the amount of money that we spend on the utility adjustments. So beware, we have found out the state auditor's office, when they find a certain utility that we somehow didn't get an agreement with the utility company on, they inform the FHWA. And now I've been in the uncomfortable position of working with the FHWA to correct the oversights. They have the authority to do anything to pull the funding on the certain utility agreement to the federal funding on the project, to even up to the program level. So we want to work with our FHWA. We want to know that in this arena of being open and transparent, that is a need, and we need to document as we work. We will be speaking about our utility matrix, and Edgar's going to be looking at some things that definitely help us with that. Okay, at this moment, I'm going to turn it back over to Oscar, and he's going to speak on saltwater pipelines.
It was about last year when we noticed that we had an issue with, it's primarily in the areas of the oil fields, and you probably noticed all the trucks being on the roads, and all roads really taking a beating. So Right-of-Way Division came up with a Senate Bill 514, and it was amended with House Bill 497. Came up with a way to allow saltwater pipeline operators to be in our right-of-way. Now, they're only allowed to install, maintain, and operate this pipeline on our facility, and it's only leased for their use. The benefit of this, and I think I've got that backwards, the impacts is the thousands of trucks needed for disposal, the increased potential for accidents and hazmat spills, and the increased damage to highways. If you've been out to South Texas, and I haven't been to West Texas, I'm sure it's the same way. You see the impact on the highways and the erosion of any asphalt structure. The good thing about this, the benefits are, it reduces the number of unauthorized unknown encroachments. It reduces the need for use of water trucks on Texas highways, and it offsets the cost associated with ongoing repair and maintenance effort. And we'll have Jesse come up. You remember the video from KXAN, that was Austin Station. And we thought that was a very good intro to what we're talking about a lot here today, and a lot of what I've worked on for the past 6 to 8 weeks. Much of this has started back, as many of y'all know, in some newspaper articles out in El Paso, some down in Houston. You heard in the video they mentioned $21 million worth of damage associated with AT&T utility delays over the past 3 years. Additionally, in the comments they were estimating $25 million worth of damage from all utilities in the past 3 years. Mr. Hoffman came and asked that we do a survey and that we work and we validate the numbers. So, as many of y'all know, we went out to the districts and performed surveys by the project and by the utility. Actually, by hand, we went back in and we pulled all of the triple-O designations from all of the construction projects for the past 3 years. Assimilated those, sent them out to the districts. They came up and we validated the 21 million, but we found out that it was closer to 30 million in damages that had occurred over the past 3 years with projects. That being additional time for barricades, the delay claims to the contractors, many things. Now, with this being in the newspaper, what actually happened there, several of our representatives, senators, it was on their agenda. It was brought up to the House Transportation Committee, and as you saw, they interviewed part of our staff and AT&T and some other utility companies. We received a directive from the committees that we form work groups with some utility companies to identify what the problems are. And the real questions are, is it the utility company's issues or is it TxDOT? You know, what's all the facts? So we're to form a work group, which we have done, and we've held meetings with the utility companies, and I'm going to be sharing some of that with you here today. And then TxDOT is to report back to the legislature with what can be done to stop paying for the utility delays. We gave a written response last week, and then the committee hearings, as you heard in the video, will be in November, where we will be testifying again. The facts. This is some general facts from the survey that I spoke about a little bit earlier. TxDOT lets approximately 1,000 projects
a year, anywhere from maybe just right under 1,000 up to 1,100, 1,150 during those 3 years. The total project cost was between 4 to 7 billion during the past 3 years. And during that time, we identified 10% of the projects with outstanding right-of-way and 20% with outstanding utilities. Now you say, boy, that sounds good. That's really great. It's only 10% with right-of-way and 20% utilities. But that included every project that was a seal coat, where they were doing striping, where we were working on signals. And then we had, as Mr. Hoffman and I tried to find a way to identify the projects that were actually expansion and the ones that required right-of-way within our definitions, that was becoming very difficult. But one thing we both could agree on is that it was probably between 400 and 500 of those projects were actually in the area of requiring the activities of right-of-way. So you would be looking at 40% utilities and 20% right-of-way, and that fits the experience that we talked about with our district counterparts. That is a lot of delays, a lot of money, and our projects are, as you know, this makes construction difficult. The one thing that was a little harder to determine because of the way it was reported was the actual time delay. Actually came up with close to 10,000 days of delay. Now, defining that in the number of years, the amount of time, we want to look at that a little closer on our definition. Each district defined it a little bit different, but we know just the magnitude. When you start saying the word 10,000 days of delay, that's a lot of time lost in not working on projects due to right-of-way and due to utilities. But you look back at it, several of these projects had 6 months delay. If one project out of 400 has a 6 months delay, those days add up. So we actually believe the magnitude is correct. We're just not sure how close it is. So we started looking at our design process. We heard the word communication somewhere here earlier. How many times? Like 5, 6, 7, 8. And one of those things is to communicate within ourselves, within our partners in the private sector, consultants, with the utility companies. What is our right-of-way process? And we started putting it out there. As we started talking with districts in the meetings with the utilities, we found that we were actually maybe going to working with utility companies at 60% design. But in the research projects and our goals to do what we need to do, we need to be working in preliminary design, and we need to be working on our agreements and conducting detailed utility investigations and design in the 20-25% range and earlier. So we know that we have to move things forward, and that's what we're talking about with utilities as we do it. We've got to quit putting things off until we finish the plans and 100% design. So, with that being said, we talked to the utility companies, and our real goal here is up in the upper left-hand corner here, is to avoid, minimize, and accommodate or relocate the facility. But we can, if we work early enough and we partner with our designers and work with the utility companies, we will know if we can move the road, if we can move the retaining wall, if we can change the size of culvert, change the grade. What can we do to avoid? And then if we do have to have a conflict, how can we minimize the effects? And then lastly, how do you accommodate it? Or how do you handle it if you have to have a major adjustment? The challenges that we know as we spoke with the companies, the challenges faced was, number one, surprise, poor communication, inadequate training of both our TxDOT forces and the utility companies and our private sector partners in the utility process. Unidentified impact, no consideration of external factors, funding, is it the right time of year, all of those types of things. And then the utilities come back again, no long-range forecasts from TxDOT. We found out as we were working with districts that many of our districts have not been holding all of their annual meetings, their quarterly meetings with utilities to allow them to know what the anticipated schedules are. And I heard Mr. Hoffman yesterday in the back speaking. He was telling, make sure that all district engineers know to handle their meetings, to hold the meetings if they have not been doing it. So TxDOT at the highest levels, we're recognizing that our communication is paramount and that we're going to need to do a better job of that. The strategies, prioritization, leveraging the resources, identifying these projects and program issues, managing the risk that Don was speaking about earlier. Using that authority to proceed that we were talking about, use that authority well, use it wisely so that we can have the most important parcels and utilities moving at the appropriate time. We'll have enhanced partnerships, we'll integrate our project scheduling, and we will reduce the risk. The training part of this is one of the things that Assessor and Edgar both have been working on. TxDOT received a $150,000 grant in the SHARP 2 program, and we have 3 pilot projects where we're using what we call a utility matrix. And we put it out and we list our utilities and we turn that flip on. Is it in conflict? Is it not? We look at the status of the utility adjustment as we go forward. Our administration has looked at the concept of what we're doing and saying, you know, we need to go statewide and we need to train all of our engineers and our project managers within TxDOT to use the utility matrix in the future. So, where are we going here? These communication guidelines, we're going to be talking about the other thing in addition to training. What do we do after the training and after our communication is not working? The utility or one of our counterparts says, you're not ready to go forward. We're not ready. What do you do? Whatever the reason is, we hit an impasse. So with AT&T, since they were the one that was up front, I was tasked with making a work group, which we did, and we held 3 WebExes and 1 meeting face-to-face. And we exchanged organizational structures. We exchanged contact information at all levels. We exchanged like 200 phone numbers back and forth. We then wrote some guidelines for escalation. Things like, if there is a problem and you cannot work it out with your counterpart, then in the other organization, who is your counterpart's superior? Where would you go? But not to go to that person individually, but to go to your superior and have them contact the appropriate counterpart in the other organization. So we established protocols for escalation of projects. We had one project as we were sitting there and it was brought up, and it was up at the administration level, and we had the email from the district engineer said, we started talking with the utility 2 years ago, and we're now 6 months after letting, and the utility still has not signed a utility agreement. And the question was asked of us, What happened for 2.5 years if you don't have an agreement? These are the types of things that we are trying to find ways to eliminate, and that is communication and escalation. We're also looking for recommendations from the utility industry, from our private sector counterparts, and from our own TxDOT workforce. And then, as you see at the bottom, the key to our success is communication. The past couple of slides were directly from our administration's conferences with the utilities, so I actually just borrowed those. This was an example of the AT&T. AT&T has 3 regional market areas, and TxDOT, we've worked in our regional or 4. We're able now, with our list, we're able to say, okay, we're in Brazos County. This looks like it would be in the coastal region of AT&T, and we can look at the phone list and find the appropriate contacts. They have had as much turnover as TxDOT has, and we noticed that they had some retirement incentives, some structural change, and they were looking at 30 to 40% rollover in the past 4 to 5 years. So with that being said, our initiative and what we learned here is we need to do this with each one of the utility companies, and we will be working on that. With this, I spoke a little bit before about the utility conflict matrix or management training. We'll be turning that over to Edgar. We have now conducted 2 training sessions. We're looking for a 3rd in San Antonio next week, and it has been, I believe, a great success so far. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jesse. My name is Edgar Kraus. I'm very excited to be back here and share with you some of the work that we've been recently working on. And to get started, I was just wondering, is there anybody in this room who had to deal with a utility conflict as part of the work in the past? Okay. All right. I figured there's a couple. Well, then I think you can relate to some. Those of you who just showed your hand, you can relate to some things on this page, on this slide here. Basically, we find that when you talk about utility conflict, you're trying to manage them well. 2 things that contribute to inefficiencies of that process is that you're lacking information about the utility conflict, and the other thing is that, well, you may not have a good strategy to manage or resolve the utility conflict. And as a result of that, we frequently find, there's like disruptions during constructions if there just was no information about a utility conflict, damage to utility installations during construction, which can be a problem, can be a danger to the utility, to the construction workers or the public. Delays, as we've seen in the video previously. Also, there can be environmental impacts that can be significant, and finally, unnecessary utility relocations, which certainly do not improve the goodwill with utility companies and your relationship with utility companies to resolve utility conflicts in the future. So, a couple years back, as part of the Strategic Highway Research Program 2, SHOP 2, a project was created to look into ways to better manage utility conflicts. And we were very fortunate under the leadership of Cesar to work on this project, and we contacted all the DOTs in the survey, and then we sit down with them, we talked a lot with what are your best practices, what can we learn from you to improve the utility conflict management. And we found that there's often many issues that are the same across state DOTs and all the US. And we came up with this concept of utility conflict matrix. Essentially, all DOTs have been using something like this or similar to that in the past, but our contribution was really to make it more consistent and look at which are the critical things to track on utility conflict. Essentially, when we got samples from all these DOTs and we would look at all the different information items, things that have been tracked, we found there was over 150 items that you could track on a utility conflict. So it can get very detailed, it can get very information intensive. So we really spent a lot of thought into figuring out what are the critical items on the utility conflict and what should be managed. So this is what we're showing here. So there's 8 items in the header of the matrix, like the owner, the project number, the basic information, and then we really wanted to focus on 15 things on the utility conflict matrix because we also wanted to keep it on a 11x7 spreadsheet. We didn't want to go, beyond that. So we got this prototype here, and it's in Excel format, and there's drop down, so it makes it easy to handle. And this is what we've been showing around the state recently with Jesse and Cesar. We've been giving them this course. We've been in Houston, in Dallas, and it's a really hands-on course where we actually have people try out the tools that we provide, and they have to identify conflicts, and we've gotten pretty good feedback so far. As part of that research project, we also found that the utility conflict matrix is a living document and has to be updated, and there's a lot of things that vary depending on what portion of the business process you're involved in. So quickly we realized, the utility conflict matrix is a huge step forward, but what would be even better is if you had a database to manage the whole thing. So we came up with this framework and a prototype of the database, and you can't really see much here, but we just wanted to show you that you can recreate the whole utility conflict matrix that people are using on spreadsheets in a database, and it really makes it a lot easier to manage and continue throughout the project development process, and it makes the handoff to the next person a lot easier as well. The only thing that's different here in this output is the last column, which is the cost analysis. And what we found was that in the beginning we had a column there for cost for each utility conflict because we wanted to track costs. But that actually created more confusion than actual benefit because it wasn't really clear what costs are we talking about. So we added another sheet to this whole process, which we call the cost estimate analysis sheet. And the purpose of that is to give you an ability to track alternatives and costs associated with different alternatives on how to resolve the utility conflicts in a separate sheet. So we're not saying we should be using this sheet for every single conflict because that would be really a lot of work and information to keep. But there are conflicts that may come back later on in the project, and people might ask questions, why did we have to move here? Was there a better way to do this? This really created a lot of costs, or this one created a lot of delays. What did you do to deal with that utility conflict? So in those cases, it's really useful to have this sheet where you can document the different alternatives that you considered, and maybe you had a discussion with the utility company, and they could tell you, well, if we have to do this, we really had to spend a lot of money, and you can document what was the thought process to arrive at the result that you actually chose in the end. So in this case, this is the cost estimate analysis sheet, and this is also in the Excel spreadsheet that we have. Finally, I just wanted to show, we don't really have a lot of time, so we can't go over all the details, but I thought this slide was really important because it shows the project development process that Jesse was showing earlier. And here we just have these little boxes that represent updates of the utility conflict matrix. And as you can see, we really recommend to consider updating the utility conflict matrix at several stages within the project development process. So there should be something very early in the preliminary design, and then it should be continuously updated with a second version in the detailed design phase at the beginning, then at 30%, at 60% towards the end. And then if there's anything still unresolved during construction, it could even be handed off to the construction manager and continued use during the construction phase. So it's important to realize that it's not a one-time deal. It requires the update of the utility conflict matrix as soon as new data becomes available in the project development process. And with this just gives you a brief overview of what we're doing, and I think we'll be in San Antonio soon for the next utility conflict management workshop, and then there might be additional ones planned. I'm not sure about that, but you can talk to Jesse, he knows more, and John. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Oscar. He's going to talk about utility adjustment adjustment for design build. Thank you.
Other than communication, the other word that you're going to hear a lot is risk. It's all about risk management and the transfer of the risk to, in our instance, in the design build world, is the transfer of the risk to the developer. As you have seen in basically a lot of their slides, the risk is it's on TxDOT to produce something so that we can go to construction. Us, is the developer, we transfer that risk to the developer. They are able to do things within the utility adjustments and actually do their construction in their sequence. So it's all driven by their time management. There are 4 sequences that we follow. One of them is we do certain things through the procurement, through the pre-procurement, through the procurement, to the notice to proceed 1 and the notice to proceed 2. All of them have a sequence in how we come up, basically start the utility adjustment process and how the developer finishes. Now, we may be able to obtain SUE. It all depends on how we want to deal with the project. We may or may not have it. I can tell you in the projects that I've been involved, we've done SUE, and we provide it as a written document to the developer. What this does, it gives them a very good idea, depending on the level of SUE that we obtain, what's out there. And that way, when they go ahead and provide with their bid towards this project, they're able to price it as closely as they can. And then we have a kickoff meeting that is held by TxDOT at condition award. We bring in the developer or the contractor, and we'll bring in the utility companies, and we basically, it's an introduction to each other, where they can start talking, they can start kind of sharing the information that they may have out there on the roadway. The other thing that happens as well is we provide with the agreements. In the typical process, you would have the standard agreement. In our process, we have the PUAAs. They are named a little bit different, but the process is pretty much the same. To get them started, to get the utility companies to agree with the developer to begin the utility adjustment process. The other thing that we do in our process, we work with the developer. We may change some of the wording in order to facilitate this process. They don't just change it because they feel like it. It still has to be approved by TxDOT. And we typically, if there's an issue that we see with the revisions, we'll take it to legal counsel, and then we'll move from there. Now, the developer may provide the SUE as well. That would also be after NTP1. NTP1 is basically telling the developer to go out there and start doing some more work. They can't actually do the construction until NTP2. They will also prepare a concept plan, which is reviewed by TxDOT. So TxDOT, even though we are not doing the work, we are in communication with the developer, and we review basically every document that they have. The DVC also, which is the developer, prepares and negotiates with utility owners. Modifications to the standard language, it is agreed upon between DVC and utility owner, and it's approved by TxDOT. So, like I said, even though we are not in the process, it is approved by TxDOT. And it's all in the development agreement, which is the primary document that drives the design build process. At NTP2, the utility owner and the DVC, they execute the negotiated utility agreements, submits to TxDOT for approval, and once after that, they can go to construction. Utility construction is completed, and then we continue through the process. This is basically when they can start construction of an adjustment of utilities, and also begin the construction of the project. In a nutshell, that is the, we don't go primarily for every process to TxDOT, but we do approve every step of the way. Short and sweet. Questions and answers. We have some time. not just myself, but also Jesse and Edgar. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question regarding the stamping of utility plans that was referenced earlier. If there's any issue for professional engineers to stamp plans that they haven't really designed because the basis is third-party information. Do you have any suggestions or input on that?
I think the real question there is, what are they certifying to? You know, are they certifying the location data that was accumulated? Is it the design of the utility? And maybe the SPD can address more of their requirements in the contract for that. But the board, you know, one roadway design sheet may have several PEs sign off for the work that they performed. And so the whole key is you're putting your seal on in what you're certifying for. But Oscar, could you?
And we also have the same process. Now, Don, correct me if I'm wrong. In order to develop an agreement documents, it is specified that the engineer does sign or execute the utility plans.
That was a risk aversion issue that we brought up a long time ago. We knew these projects were going to go pretty fast, and we're going to have a lot of folks working on them. We wanted to know who was doing the design, so we elevated it to make sure that our developer had an engineer sign and seal it before they turned it in as part of our utility package. So it's prevented a lot of conflict, provided us with some confidence that utility adjustment is going to be done according to all the engineering requirements.
So Don, just to clarify right there, the engineer was designing the utility relocation, and the engineer worked for the developer.
Right.
Okay.
Or
Or
the utility company.
the utility company, whichever. But that is something in our rules that we can require in certain cases in our TAC, that we can require an engineer's seal, and especially in a case like this, we are in a position where we're paying for it, or it's being paid for. So things are a lot easier than traditional. Renee?
You can also have, what we had on 130 is a utility company, they refused to sign and seal it. So is what we had the developer do is they hired an outside third party to go through, review it for UAR compliance, and when they signed and sealed it, that was their disclaimer that they were only signing and sealing the plans based on following the rules and regs in the UAR.
But again, there was another function of us managing that risk because we were asking others to do that work for us. We had to have some confidence that it was going to be done in an appropriate manner. And that was a bit of a fight. They didn't want to have to go out and hire another company to sign and seal something that they didn't draw. And so we worked out the language on the certification that they only signed and sealed the part that they're certifying, and that was the UAR compliance.
Anybody else?
This one.
Actually, I have two questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
First one, Jesse, you mentioned about the escalation up the chain on the utility companies and gaining that list. Is TxDOT going to share that with the consultants, or is TxDOT planning on doing the escalation themselves?
The escalation, well, the contact information of it, you should already be working at the lowest or the coordination level with the utility company if you're working there. If the escalation should occur and it goes up, it's within the TxDOT structure. We will be distributing. We're working on the communication plan to all the districts and within AT&T. How to distribute that information. Also, AEP and one other company has contacted us, and they are going to be providing similar documents that we'll be working with. So there'll be more in the future on that. But the prototype, the beginning is started, and I like to say that we've already had 3 or 4 instances where I've gotten phone calls and it's already helped. So it's a good thing.
The escalation matrix that Jesse was talking about is for projects that are delivered under the design bid, it's built in process. TxDOT under the strategic project division on our design build projects, we already have an escalation matrix, and we developed with our developer, design build partner, and we take a more active role in the interaction with the utility companies if something's kind of caught up, and we'll actually get engaged with the utility company and try to solve some of those problems.
Right.
So it's a little different methodology.
And that is actually is identified in this. We reference and show the contacts within SPD.
It's still the same issues are still there. It's just a different process of going about it,
And different phone numbers to call.
pretty much. Yes, sir.
What kind of specifications are there, if any exist, for the use of trenchless technologies? Is that up to the developer? If they will use renewal or construction methods to relocate utilities?
I guess I didn't understand the question. Go
We're
ahead.
talking about trenchless
Like
utility.
horizontal directional.
Yeah, we are, because we transferred the risk to the utility contract, to the design build contractor, they're actively engaged in trying to find out what works best for them and their schedule and their constructability issues. So they are fully, I guess they're responsible for figuring out that if they want to use the trenchless technology and do directional board or some sort of mooring mechanism, we're happy to help that out as long as it meets the UAR and we can prove up that how the pipe goes where they said they're going to go. Because that has been an issue a couple times where the pipe would wobble a little, and we had a property owner that was very concerned that pipe didn't go outside our right of way under his property.
Right.
So, but it's pretty much on the design build contractor to figure that out.
Right. The current utility accommodation rules allows for trenchless technology. And one thing as you work with those, as Don alluded to, we're looking at the product, the end result of the adjustment, meeting the needs of TxDOT more than the actual method that's used, because the trenchless technology and the things that are coming forward, the technology is changing very quickly. So we look at the results, and it's written, you know, like encasement and other things. Everybody thinks about, oh, it's only ductile iron, cast iron. We have the flexibility to say are equivalent in strength and durability. So many of those things that you see can be accommodated that way.
One thing I want to talk about in trenchless is we're doing directional bores. A lot of times, because all of our design build contracts are under a 3D mechanism or protocol, we want to know where that pipe is. So we actually ask a lot of them are doing with a GPS in the head, so we know exactly where that pipe is as far as XYZ, so that it ends up on the as-bills.
Anybody else?
Renee?
Just maybe one more. Sorry, I had to. On your conflict matrix that you put out, I was curious because I know you list all the potential conflicts. How do y'all go through in determining if or isn't it is a true conflict or not, if it's meeting UAR compliance? Who does that calculation for you?
I think I'm going to start, Renee, here, and then the others will jump in. Number one, the first thing is list all utilities on the project. The end result of this is to know if it is in conflict or not, and that we, at the end of the day, we have a complete inventory of all utilities. It may be that we only need a joint use. It may be only that we need to get a permit on file, but we don't need to relocate. But that needs to be documented. So one, it covers everything. And then after that, Edgar, if you would like to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we had like an implementation project in Maryland where we started the whole thing, and we didn't really tell the DOT on how to use them or who's responsible for what, and we kind of left it up to them. But we were, like, when we met with them 6 months later, they shared with us how they actually did it, and it really, I think it helps if the project manager or the designer, the main designer, gets involved at the very beginning of the process. So there's, in that he helps with the utility conflict identification, and then there has to be a process where the utility coordinator gets involved with the utility conflict. But I think it's ultimately the designer's responsibility to figure out if it's in conflict or not. So do you want to add anything?
Yeah, one thing that was not So it's almost like an escalation process. You first identify potential conflict, then it's almost like a decision matrix. Yes, no, or maybe. If there's no conflict, then you do something. Then you look at things like accommodation policy and other things. If it is a yes, then automatically triggers all the utility conflict management process. If it is a maybe, then you could, for example, determine that you need additional data. So it's very systematic in the sense that, you know.
But y'all don't have a way to calculate it to know the clearance or the depth covered.
Well, that's one of the questions that has to
Right.
be answered, but under the design build methodology, we're gonna list everything that's out there, and we're gonna make it, our design build contract prove up that it meets UAR, and if it does, we're okay with that. We'll do a abbreviated assembly that tells us how it meets and how it fulfills all the requirements of UAR. And if it doesn't, then obviously we go into a PUAA or an amendment, and we do the adjustment or the accommodation. But even if it, as long as it's on the list, we want to know about it. And if it doesn't have to have any accommodation at all, we still will have an abbreviated assembly for it.
Remember that we're talking about avoid, minimize, and accommodate right there. And one of the important things is the engineer is the one that's helping make that decision as we go. And other people will be using that judgment to see how the project is progressing, be it for cost, be it for time, for all of those issues. And so I believe it has to come back on the project engineer. Cesar had another comment here.
Yeah, if you have a 3D model, there are a lot of things that you can already do through software. Because you can apply a rule. If you have a surface model, for example, you can say, okay, one of the rules is depth of cost. And if you know the threshold, then you just stick to it. That's one way. It's not perfect. That's the
Okay, thank you. That was a great discussion, great questions.